It's time for America Outdoors Radio, the show that covers the outdoor scene across the U.S. of A. and the entire continent. Fishing, hunting, conservation, outdoor recreation, and great destinations. We cover it all every week. It's your country, your outdoors. Let's explore it together with your host, John Kruse.
Welcome to the show, and welcome to summer, which, as you know, is a great time to get a whole bunch of books and read through them, especially if you've got some time off. Well, we're going to talk to a couple of authors today. In just a second, you're going to hear from Charles Thacher, the author of Fishing and Other Follies. And after that, you'll hear from John Shtogren. He is the author of High on Hogs, Fair Chase Boar Hunting in the Southeast. And I think you're going to find both of these conversations to be quite interesting. The other interview we have for you today, well, that's about a potential public land sell-off introduced by Senator Mike Lee from Utah. Andrew McKean is going to join us for an in-depth conversation about that. Throwing some outdoors news, we've got a great show coming your way, so let's get it started with our first interview. It is summer, and that means it's a great time to get some books, especially about fishing and hunting. And we've got a great one for you to enjoy, especially if you like to travel and if you're into fly fishing. It's Fishing and Other Follies by Charles Thacher. And with us on the line is Charles. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your book?
Well, I've started writing some of these chapters as long as 20 years ago for the journal that my fishing club in New York puts out, and for a couple of other local publications. And I had enough of them that I said I ought to do a book, and I getting near the end of my fishing life maybe, so I decided to add some more chapters and make a book out of it and enhance the chapters that I'd originally written.
Well, obviously you've done a lot of fishing in the Northeast, and you've done a good amount of fishing out West, but you've fished the world over. I mean, I'm looking through your chapters. You fished in Austria, you fished in Russia, you fished in Argentina several times, and I want to get into that in a little bit. But before we do, I really want you to share the story of a horseback trip you took into the Bob Marshall Wilderness where you were fly fishing for trout. And it started off really rough, didn't it?
Well, this was a trip more than 40 years ago, I think early 80s. At that time, there was only one outfitter that I could locate that was doing trips in the Bob. And I'd read a magazine article about him, and it sounded great. So I collected 3 other guys. None of us were experienced fly fishermen. We all knew a little bit about it, and some of us were real tenderfoots. So we got out to this trip, and the idea was to meet the guide or outfitter. He and his son were taking us out, and when we got to his ranch, which was about 60 miles from a paved road, he wasn't there. And his wife was there, and she gave us some lemonade or something, and we were waiting for him to come back, and he finally, and what she said was that he was out in his plane with his son looking for his horses. And that was a shock to us because he knew we were coming, and we thought he had his horses well organized. But the real shock was that the outfitter out in the middle of no place had his own plane. That took us completely by surprise. But he finally came back, and he couldn't find his horses. So he told us that he had to get his reserve horses, put a pack together, and some riding horses, and go on this trip. We left about 3 or 4 hours later than we intended. None of us were experienced riders. It was about a 35-mile ride into the place where we would start fishing and floating. It was a 5-day trip. And he got on his horse, and immediately his horse threw him. And he went flying through the air, landed on his butt. This is this 65-year-old or so experienced rider, experienced outfitter. And we were in shock because we had not ridden much at all. And if his horse was going to throw him, we were a little worried about ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, he got up, and he and his son got this horse and tied him to a tree. And the horse started running around the tree, flipped himself over on his back, and the son kicked him in the head and put him out for about 10 seconds. And then the horse came to and got up, and the outfitter got on the horse, and he had tamed him. He had broken him, so the horse was fine. We all got on our horses, and we started on this trip, and we were gone maybe a couple of hours, and we were riding along this ravine, and the pack started fighting among themselves, pecking at one another. And the reason was, I guess, because this pack had never been in a pack together, and horses have their own idea of where they belong in the pecking order, and they didn't like it. So they started fighting each other in the butt, and finally the front horse turned around and snapped at the one behind him, and the whole pack went over the side of this hill and went down about maybe 30, 40 feet into this ravine. And we were, of course, very worried. We had all our stuff for the week. It turned out it wasn't a huge deal because the wranglers were able to get the pack back up in the trail. But we were totally intimidated. We said, this is the trip from hell.
Right.
But we went on our way, and maybe another hour or two, we came to this place where you walk around a cliff wall. And the outfitter said, well, if you guys aren't really man enough to do this, you can get off your horses and walk a different way behind this hill or a huge rock, and you won't be exposed to this cliff. Well, two of our guys went that way, and two of us went. One guy got off his horse, and two of us went around this cliff wall, and it was probably 6-7 feet wide, and the cliff was a sheer cliff dropping down 400 or 500 feet at least. It was scary as hell, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't know anything about riding, so we were riding high in the saddle and trying to pull our horse's head away from this cliff. The horse was looking over the cliff, and of course the outfitter said, you guys are crazy. If the horse sees the drop-off, he will not go over it. But if you force him to look toward the wall of the cliff on your left, he may go over it. And, you know, this outfitter he was kind of like Curly in City Slickers, if you know that movie.
Right.
He was a rough, tough guy like Jack Palance was there, and he took no prisoners. But anyway, so we got around that, and we all joined up again. And frankly, the rest of the trip was fine. We actually became pretty good friends with the outfitter and his son because we were playing poker at night, and he liked to play poker, so he joined our poker game. And finish was that we had one of the great float trips that I could ever imagine. It was a 5-day float. We never saw another person on this float for 5 days, and it's the most beautiful. The South Fork of the Flathead River is the most beautiful river I've ever seen in my life. Fish would come up to take dry flies from 15 feet below the surface, and the water was so clear you could see them all the way rising up from the bottom. It was just an absolutely stunning environment. And I can't imagine a better trip. And today this trip is much more common. A lot of people go into the Bob on their own and fish these waters. A lot of individual boats go down, recreational boats. So it's very different, but the fishing's just as good, and it's still just as beautiful a place. So that's basically that trip, and it was my first fly fishing trip in the West. I just barely learned to fly fish, and it was a great start, and looking back on it, a great memory.
Well, that is a really great story. And folks, that's just one of the many stories you're going to find in Fishing and Other Follies. We don't even have time to talk about self-guided fishing in Argentina. But for Charles, if people want to get this book, how do they get it?
They can buy it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It's listed under my name. You've got to spell the last name right, Thacher, and Fishing and Other Follies. You can find it on Amazon. It's readily available. Probably get it in a couple of days.
There you go. It's Fishing and Other Follies by Charles Thacher. And Charlie, you are a very well-read angler, and you're a great writer, too. I'm really enjoying the book. Folks, look for it at Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, and spend some time reading about fishing all over the world. Charlie, thanks so much for sharing this with us today on America Outdoors Radio.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Do you love to fish? Do you love to eat fish? Well, if you do, you know how important it is to have something to keep things sharp. Now, in the boat, it might be something to keep your hook sharp, like maybe the pocket knife sharpener from Work Sharp, which also works just fine along with the guided field sharpener for keeping fillet knives sharp. So when it comes to cleaning those fish you catch for the day, you can get that done in a hurry. And let's not forget, back at the house, when you're preparing those fish for a meal, that's when you want to have a kitchen knife sharpener, and there's several electric ones available. You can find them all at worksharptools.com, which lists all sorts of both manual and electric sharpeners you can use in the kitchen, in the shop, or in the field. Sharp hooks and sharp knives make for a happy day on the water, so get your sharpener today at worksharptools.com or look for these products at quality sporting goods stores and hardware stores near you.
Are you looking to reel in the marketing opportunity of a lifetime? Then set the hook, because we've got it right here for you. America Outdoors Radio has sponsorships available, and we offer affordable platforms to reach thousands of listeners interested in fishing, hunting, and the outdoors. Find out more by contacting John Kruse through his website at AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. That's AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. Hurry, though. If you wait too long, the big opportunity might just get away. AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com.
Modular. When it comes to getting the most out of your Camp Chef 2-burner propane stove, that's the word to use. Sure, you can cook directly over either burner with a pot or pan, but how about putting a grill box on to serve up burgers, steaks, or chicken? Put a griddle on to cook up your breakfast. Pizza? We've got that covered too with our pizza oven that you place right over the stove. Whatever you're cooking while camping or at home, Camp Chef has got you covered. Find out more about modular stove accessories at campchef.com today.
Welcome back in to America Outdoors Radio. We've been sharing some books you can read this summer, and we've got one that's about hunting. It's High on Hogs, Fair Chase Boar Hunting in the Southeast, and we've got the author on the line, John Shtogren. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
So what inspired you to write this book? And I read this, and I had to laugh when I heard it.
Well, I have written in the past about the concept of fair chase, encouraging hunters to kind of keep the old traditions about ethical hunting in mind and not turn too much into a shooting emphasis. And I happened to see Ted Nugent do a piece on the Outdoors Network. And in that piece, he's in a helicopter with automatic weapons strafing hogs across Texas and leaving the bodies out to rot in the sun. And that violated everything I believe in about hunting.
Yeah.
So that was the moment of truth for me. That's what really got it going.
Well, I get that. I completely get that. You know, people use thermal sights and hunt at night as well, and there's a fine line between shooting and fair chase hunting, and I think especially with hogs, people seem more inclined to cross that line.
Absolutely. A lot of it comes down to the way they're designated. Throughout the Southeast, there is not one state that designates them as a game animal. They are nuisance, invasive, kill them all. State of California has them as a game animal, and it's a whole different situation with the way they're hunted, the knowledge that's gained through tagging, through understanding the rules and regulations. So a real split between the East Coast and the West Coast on that.
Now, I never knew until I was reading your book how wild boar got to America. I'm guessing our listeners don't either. Why don't you enlighten us?
Yeah, people I talk to, have only heard about the feral hog problem, for the last 10 years or so, and they kind of lumped feral hogs in with Asian carp in the Mississippi or pythons in the Everglades. Well, truth is, feral hogs, wild boar, have been around, it's fair to say, longer than we have in the United States. If we look at the southeastern population, that starts in about 1540. With De Soto traveling in Spanish coming out of Cuba, traveling all through Florida, and then all through 10 of the southeastern states. And he's traveling with a huge band of soldiers and priests, and also a herd of hogs. And those hogs became, we come in peace, here, have a pig, to the Indians along the way. And to this day, those were the original places for hogs to become established down in the river bottoms, and those are the states with the highest populations today. So they've been around for 500 years in this area. You'll see it similar in California along the establishment of the missions, and hogs were released to fatten up, and a hog within a couple of generations will revert and become more and more like their wild boar ancestors. Main bunch of missions in California were in the Monterey Peninsula, and that's where most of the hogs are now.
Very interesting.
Interesting coincidence.
So let's talk about what kind of firearms and ammo you like to use for fair chase hog hunting. So obviously we're not talking about AR-15s here.
Right. I personally, a couple of guns that I use, I hunted hogs both with crossbows and handguns, but my preferred weapons happen to be muzzle-loading rifles. I like the discipline of a single shot. It's not a matter of can I hit it, it's will I and will it drop. So I shoot what's called a Savage ML-10. It happens to take smokeless powder and use about a 250 grain bullet, which that particular gun likes very much. Also, for a sidearm, which I don't tend to use after having some unfortunate experiences, but it's a converted Colt 45, which is now in what's called 460 Roland, which is essentially a 44 Magnum.
But clearly you've got to be close in to hunt hogs if you're using these weapons.
You do those, and that's the difference between southeastern California. I don't think I have, 90% of the hogs that I have killed from Texas to Florida and up through South Carolina have been under 50 yards. That's what the cover is like. Right now, I am looking down at the cover of my book, High on Hogs, and it shows me with a pistol, and in the background, it's brush. You can't see more than 15 yards behind me.
Right.
There's a second book, and it's called The Complete Guide to Hunting Wild Boar in California. It's by Gary Kramer years ago. And same thing. He's kneeling with a rifle next to a hog, and you can see forever behind him. I mean, it's like miles of open territory. And that's kind of the big difference between West Coast hunting and East Coast hunting. Open land hunting versus heavy brush.
Very interesting. Let's talk about places where you can hunt that are essentially public lands. Now, we have huge swaths of public land to hunt game in the western United States, whether it be Bureau of Land Management land or Forest Service land. But in the Southeast, not so much. So what are some places you recommend hunting hogs at?
I think first thing you have to do is do your homework. There are a number of places that if you go to the Department of Agriculture, you'll see where they have given money because they need hog control in areas. And they've got them in Louisiana, they've got them in Florida, they've got them in Georgia. And it's really showing you where the concentrations are for hogs at this point in time. From then you try to get to the local game warden or whoever's boots on the ground information, and you get on the phone and talk to them. The hogs that were here this year might not be there next year. So you'd really need that kind of current information. There's a couple of very good Army bases that have lots of land and try to control their hogs, and you try to get in touch with them through the U.S. Army. But mostly it's going to be onto private land after that.
Gotcha.
And that is just something you just have to... Word of mouth is actually better than advertisements because you'll find out what's really going on.
Okay, great. One last thing. Folks who haven't gone hunting for hogs before might want to go with a guide. There's a couple of questions you ask before you commit, and one of them has to do with how many hunters are you dealing with at a time, and why is that important?
Well, too many of the commercial operations will overload. They'll have 10 hunters, 2 guides, let's say. They've got to put those people out. They've got to know where they are, and vehicles break down, and people get stranded, and so on. You need a much closer ratio of guide to hunter than is often available. My rule of thumb is really 1 guide, maximum 4 or 5 hunters. If he's talking about more than that, there could be a problem.
And you also have a minimum on the size of the property that they have. Go ahead and tell our listeners about this.
Well, hogs, under any kind of pressure, will leave an area. So unless you've got a big area to hunt, you'll lose them. They'll go to a different piece of property. My minimum tends to be around 5,000 acres. That isn't just a guide telling you he has access to it. He has to have exclusive rights to it. Otherwise, somebody will come in and there'll be too much pressure and the hogs are gone. Hogs under pressure will leave the area.
So many more questions, but so little time, so we're going to have to leave it at that. But, John, where can folks get your book, High on Hogs, Fair Chase Boar Hunting in the Southeast?
Both the print edition and the ebook is available on Amazon. And you can just check that on Amazon, type in the name of the title, and it'll pop right up.
All right. That's High on Hogs by John Shtogren, spelled S-H-T-O-G-R-E-N. That's S-H-T-O-G-R-E-N. It's a great little book, and if you want to get into hog hunting or find out more about it, I think this is the book for you. John, thanks for sharing this with us today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thanks, John.
This portion of the show is brought to you by our friends at Henry Repeating Arms, and they've got something brand new out. It is the Lever Action Supreme Rifle, and it takes lever action rifles to a whole new level. They have completely reinvented the lever action rifle here. For example, it actually comes with either a 5-round magazine to comply with certain state laws, or an AR-style magazine that will hold a whole bunch more ammunition. There's brand new, innovative iron sights, and it's also really easy to put a red dot or compact scope on top of it, too. It's lightweight, and it comes in 223, 5.56, and 300 blackout calibers with more to come. You can find out more about the Lever Action Supreme Rifle from Henry Repeating Arms, made right here in America, by going to henryusa.com. That's henryusa.com. Check out the Lever Action Supreme and look for a dealer near you. You're back in with America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse. We have some serious business to talk about here. You thought that the public land sell-off that was inserted into the House Republican bill was gone, because when the House had it, they inserted that they wanted the sale of up to 500,000 acres of land. Representative Ryan Zinke out of Montana, along with several other Republicans, said, no, we are not going to go with this, and they stripped it out. But now we have some bad news because it's in the Senate and it's come back with a vengeance. With us here to tell you more is Andrew McKean, who just wrote a very in-depth article about this for Outdoor Life. Andrew, great to have you back on the show.
Well, hello, John. It's nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
So Senator Mike Lee, a longtime advocate for selling federal lands to the states, is in charge of a certain committee, and he's come up with a draft bill. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, I would love to. So, you framed it just exactly right. This is all in the conversation of passing our federal budget for next year. And as you described, the revenue bills, as the Civics 101 adherents will recall, start in the House Representatives. And so each of the House committees submitted their version of, or their input on the budget. And when it came to the Interior Department, that's where we saw that kind of last minute, well, not kind of, 11th hour input of a proposal to sell up to 500,000 acres in Nevada and Utah to go to the U.S. Treasury. As you just described, a bunch of House Republicans led by Ryan Zinke shot that down and it was removed. Well, what happened is that House budget bill then went to the Senate, where is, again, Civics 101, the process starts over again. And in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, that's the Committee of Jurisdiction for the Interior Department, they came up with their own version of the budget. And it was kind of jaw-dropping what they came up with. The chairman of that committee is Mike Lee from Utah, as you mentioned, who has a long time, and he's been super consistent about this, has felt that federal government has no legal ability to own land, and that it was all being held sort of in trusteeship in order to revert to the states, which are the rightful owners of all of this public land in the West. I mean, he is adamant about it. There's sort of dubious legal footing for that opinion, but that's his opinion. Anyway, he basically voiced that opinion in this budget bill, which came out last week, and in it was some pretty weird and interesting language that basically mandated that the language I'm looking at right now is between 0.5% and 0.75% of all BLM holdings in 11 Western states, and the same amount in Forest Service holdings must be sold within 6 months of passage of the bill. And that entire amount, which accounts to about between 2 and 3 million acres, must all be sold within 5 years of passage. And so it wasn't like could be or might be, it was shall be. And 90% of the revenue from those land sales would then go to the U.S. Treasury to offset our federal deficit. It's hard to explain just how sort of norm-busting this is. It's the first time that this magnitude of land sales has ever been proposed. As I said in my Outdoor Life piece, this is historic. In modern U.S. history, there has not been anything like it.
These lands, BLM lands, Forest Service lands, in 12 western states would be mandated to be sold off, but it does not include Montana. Why is that?
You're right. So it is 11 western states. It would be 12 with Montana, but I think Lee is looking over what happened in the House. You mentioned Ryan Zinke's leadership of killing that proposal in the House. Well, the Montana congressional delegation has been pretty adamant about their support for federal land. And on the Senate side, that includes a senior senator from Montana, Steve Daines, and a junior senator named Tim Sheehy, both of whom have been pretty vocal in their opposition to public land sales. Well, I think Lee, looking at, if he didn't get those two senators, his package might fail. And so he negotiated a side deal with them to exempt Montana from those land sales. And so that does a couple of things. One, it puts more land in the remaining 11 states on the auction block. And it kind of takes the Montana delegation out of the fight in terms of this. And so I think a lot of the agitation that's happened ever since this came out and we reported on it has been like, okay, how do we kill this? Especially because, with the Montana Republican support, it seems to have sort of wind in its sails to pass.
So this was the draft bill that came out of the committee. What happens next?
Good question. So there's no legal requirement for the committee, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, to vote on the budget draft that we reported on that includes this land sale. However, the full House Republicans did over the weekend, this would have been a week ago, submitted or released what they called their markup. And in it, they looked at some of the more egregious language in Lee's proposal. And I should back up a second. One of the things that Lee has been saying forever is, hey, it's not every piece of public land everywhere. This is only land that's in the urban interface of fast-growing western cities that really should be sold because it has low recreational value but high value for housing and infrastructure. If we can sort of release some of the bottlenecks of growth areas around Las Vegas and Boise and Winnemucca and Carson City and St. George, Utah, and some of these other places that are growing fast that are, ringed by BLM land, that it'll be a win-win. There'll be money for the U.S. Treasury and there will be available land for affordable housing. But, and I'm sorry this is so long-winded, any legislation really, you got to follow some of these sort of blind corridors to the truth. In his draft, Lee's package really, it made passing mention of affordable housing, but it also had this ability that any of this public land could be sold to achieve what he called associated community needs as determined by the Secretary. That would be the Secretary of Agriculture for the Forest Service or the Secretary of Interior for BLM land. Well, associated community needs is pretty open-ended, and a lot of critics of this were like, whoa, this is really a blank check for development or sale of public land way far away from urban centers. This has nothing to do with affordable housing. Well, I'm getting to your question. The House Republicans came back with their markup last weekend and struck the community needs portion of that. So now this reads, associated infrastructure to support local housing needs. So it's a little bit tighter, I think, to Lee's initial idea that this should be and would be for affordable housing, but there's still an awful lot of sort of slop and indecision in the language here that I still think it's important to pay attention to this because this could be a land sale that has much more to do with consolidating big private land ownerships in the West, maybe buying ski hills and entire mountain ranges for other things besides community housing needs.
I should note here that I had Randy Newberg on the air about a month or two ago talking about this very issue and that this has happened before, that land around Las Vegas that was federal land was sold. The whole idea was to make it used for affordable housing, and what happened was high-end developers swept in and put in high-end developments, which were not affordable at all.
That's exactly right. So, it's important to note that I think one of the bones that is caught in the throat of a lot of people on this Lee bill is it's really bypassing a process that is in place to do what he wants to do on a much smaller scale, and that is it's right and good to dispose of federal land or to sell it in places where it's really not doing a public good. And in some of the places that Lee mentions, he's not all wrong. There's BLM land that's right along interstates in a lot of places that may be constraining let's say, the extension of a sewer line or a water line or some sort of civic infrastructure. In some places, there is affordable housing binds and needs and more land available could alleviate some of that if, as Randy said, it was not done with a huge profit motive and high-end development. What I'm getting at is I don't think the conservation and hunting and angling community should take our eye off the bigger picture that there may be places and reasons for selling public land. However, there's something called the Federal Land Management. It's pronounced FLPMA, and it's Federal Land Policy Act. It's something like that. Within that is a mechanism for the agencies to sell public land. But within that, and I think this is really good and in the public interest, it requires those agencies to reinvest revenue from the sale of that land in an account that can buy higher value public land. So think about it this way. You're going to sell maybe some low value in terms of recreational land against a city boundary, but the revenue for that's going to go to buy an in-holding maybe in a national forest where we can consolidate public land holdings or even have an access corridor into landlocked public land. In other words, there's a higher and better use for that. Well, that process already exists. And so for Lee and company to sort of bypass that and have this really, as I said, norm busting, and I think huge in scale proposal to sort of have a blank check to sell public land for really undefined uses is really aberrant behavior.
You're listening to America Outdoors Radio. We're talking to Andrew McKean, writing for Outdoor Life, about a possible sell-off of our public lands of up to 3 million acres of land in 11 western states. Andrew, would you mind sticking around for another segment?
I'd love to.
Ready to step up to a quality-built rifle or shotgun that's a true classic? Check out Henry Repeating Arms. American-made. There's over 150 models to choose from in a variety of finishes and calibers for hunters and target shooters. Many of these are lever-action models with a classic look right out of the Old West. Don't be deceived, though. Henry Repeating Arms are modern, rugged, reliable, and have a lifetime guarantee. Find out more and order a free catalog today at henryusa.com. That's henryusa.com.
Come explore the Dalles in Oregon for outdoors fun. Hike amongst the wildflowers, bike our riverfront trail, or visit the Gorge Discovery Center where you can enjoy a live raptor display, or even check out our National Neon Sign Museum. But don't forget the fishing. We've got salmon, steelhead, bass, walleye, and monster-sized sturgeon waiting just for you. When the day is done, tell those tall tales at one of our wineries, breweries, or restaurants and plan your next adventure. Find out more at explorethedalles.com.
John Kruse here, looking to improve your bottom line as a business that caters to outdoors enthusiasts. You can do so for a very cost-effective price by advertising on America Outdoors Radio. I will tailor a marketing campaign for you, reaching hundreds of thousands of listeners every weekend tuning into our show on 135 stations in 33 states. We've got a sponsor opening right now, so contact me through my website at americaoutdoorsradio.com and let's talk about helping you.
When you buy a sharpener from Worksharp, you aren't purchasing a product, you're making a very good long-term investment. Whether you're buying a knife sharpener for the field, a knife and tool sharpener for the shop, or have a knife sharpener on the kitchen counter, you'll find they are durable and will do the job of sharpening your knives and tools for years to come. Make sharp happen with Worksharp at a sporting goods store near you and at WorksharpTools.com.
Hey, I'm Brant, and her name is Sherry.
Hello.
She's a friend of mine whom we were just praying for because of a surgery she just went through.
Yes, and I am very happy about something you actually talk about all the time, which is
MediShare.
That is right.
Yeah. So what was your experience like with MediShare and the healthcare bills?
Honestly, Brant, seamless. And what a blessing that is when you're already nervous about a health issue, which I was.
Yeah.
Members shared my expenses. There were zero problems. And let me tell you, having people pray with you when you call in in with your need. That is just...
It is refreshing.
Yes, that's what it is.
What I keep telling people love MediShare and they love saving money. A typical family can save $500 a month.
I am very thankful for MediShare. It is so different, and I mean different in a very, very good way.
It is good different. Call now. They're easy to talk to, and you can get a price within 2 minutes. Call 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE 40. 855-SHARE-40.
You're back in with America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse. We've got Andrew McKean back on the line talking about a potential sell-off of up to 3 million acres of BLM and Forest Service lands. So, Andrew, continuing our conversation, sounds like Senator Lee is basically taking a machete to a situation where a scalpel is required. Why do you think he's trying this wide-ranging sale of public lands? Is it not just for affordable housing, but also for like mineral extraction and things like that?
I'm going to answer that in two ways. One, I think he is very shrewdly taking advantage of a moment in time and a situation, and that is the budget bill. You know, this is Trump's one big, beautiful bill that is really an omnibus bill that has so many different pieces and parts to it. You know, there's defense spending in there. There's a big tax cut that would make some of these tax cuts permanent. There's Social Security and entitlement programs are in this whole mix. So, it's big, that's for sure. And I think Lee is calculating that by putting in the sale of public land as a benefit to the U.S. Treasury in a moment where we're really thinking fiscally conservative, that it's almost too big to fail in the sense like, yeah, this is a meaningful and negative thing for an awful lot of Western hunters and anglers and hikers and skiers. And I mean, anybody who uses our public land. But that in the big picture, that's small potatoes compared to the big national sort of moment. And so it's a little bit cynical, I think, to sneak something of this magnitude into a must-pass bill. So I think that's sort of the situation that we're in, the context for it. But you kind of mentioned sort of the bigger picture and why he might be interested in doing this. I'm not going to comment on sort of the mineral extraction and sort of the profit motive. I think really, and I've asked the senator through his staff to speak on the record about kind of his big picture of public lands and why this is such a consistent issue for him. So I'm putting words in his mouth a little bit, but I think really he feels very strongly that the federal government should not be in the land management business, that really all of the Forest Service and BLM lands in the West were never meant to be federal in the first place. You know, that it was up to the government to hold them until the states got on their legs and had legitimate institutions and the ability to manage them, and then that all of these lands should be handed over to the state. And he's been consistent in this. I mean, he's a smart attorney from Utah who's really researched land use, and he has taken this all the way up to the Supreme Court. As you might recall, Utah appropriated several $1 million, this would be the Utah state legislature, to pursue this idea that federal land ownership is illegal and that federal land should revert to the state. So, you know, you just really look at 20 years of agitation from Utah, especially to have this done. And this just, I think, is a very calculated and strategic moment for that movement.
So what happens next to this bill? Does it go to a vote before the Senate?
Good question. Yes, it does. So assuming that there's not, the lands package won't be omitted completely from the budget bill as what happened in the House. Let's just assume it's going to stay in the Senate package. It looks like it will not go to a committee vote, but instead will go to a vote of the full House floor. Now I'm going to ask you to kind of think about the political calculus here. The Republicans can only afford to lose 3 votes in the Senate. And so I think there's right now, we're in the later days of June up until July 4th. These next couple of weeks are when the Republican leadership in the Senate wants to get this big, beautiful bill past the Senate. I won't speculate on what might happen, but if this passes the Senate with the lands package attached, it would then go back to the House. Because remember, the House omitted the lands package from their version.
Right.
So again, your Civics 101, anytime there's a change, a substantive change in the legislation between the two houses, it has to go to a conference committee to iron out the differences. And so this would then go back to a House conference committee where either the lands package would be put back in the House version and passed, or the Senate lands package would be omitted and the whole thing would pass. Regardless of sort of which alternative that is, then it would go, you know, to both chambers to re-ratify, and if passed, would go to the the president for his signature. So, I mean, we could be looking at some pretty big movements within this by July 4th. That deadline is significant because that's the summer recess for both houses of Congress when these congressmen and women come back to their home states, and it's an opportunity for all of us to remind them what's important. So if this budget package does not pass by then, I think there will be some really interesting sort of grassroots agitation that happens if it does pass, because they really don't want to come back with this as an open-ended question on recess. It's anybody's guess what could happen. So anyway, I would just encourage your listeners, just pay attention to this issue, and no matter how they feel about it, get involved at whatever level that they can.
And there's lots of organizations where you can get involved, including backcountry hunters and anglers. I'm sure the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is going to weigh in on this, along with several other conservation groups. So get involved that way, but definitely get a hold of your senator and your congressperson and tell them you are opposed to this massive sale of public lands, because once they are gone, they are gone. And despite Senator Lee's assurance to hunters and anglers that they still have access, no, they won't. These lands are going to be sold off. They're likely going to be developed, and you will lose permanent access to them. So again, get a hold of your senator, get a hold of your representative, let them know you oppose this massive sell-off, and let's do what we can to stop this, because, as I said, once they're sold, they're gone forever. Andrew, thank you so much for shining a light on this today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thank you, John.
And now let's turn to a brighter topic.
It's time to talk record fish.
If you're looking to catch a big tiger trout, head to Kemmerer in western Wyoming. From the Outdoor Wire and Wyoming Game and Fish, we learn another year, another tiger trout record in the Cowboy State. Now, if you're wondering what a tiger trout is, it's a sterile hybrid produced by crossing a female brown trout with a male brook trout. Wyoming Game and Fish first stocked tiger trout in 2014, and the fish have done well. Now, last year, Jackson Kroll of Kemmerer caught a record 12.77-pound tiger trout between Viva Naughton Reservoir, where they were originally stocked, and the Kemmerer City Reservoir. Kroll's fish beat out a record from the previous year. In 2023, Owen Shad of Cheyenne set the state record with an 11.93 tiger trout caught from Viva Naughton Reservoir. Well, fast forward to June of this year, and Shelby Holder of Kemmerer has set a new record. He did this on June 6th with a 14-pound, 15.2-ounce fish caught in the Hams Fork River near Kemmerer. The fish was 31.2 inches long and had a girth of 19 inches. Now, here's the real surprise about this catch. Holder caught the fish with just a one-weight fly rod using a brown woolly bugger. Holder said he was using 8-pound test line and a leader, and it took him 30 minutes to land the fish. Holder was actually fishing for rainbow trout, but had caught tiger trout in that particular hole. He said he saw this particular tiger trout come up from behind a couple of rainbows and try to run them out of the hole. So, Holder said, I thought I would cast at him. That fish rolled on the fly, he set the hook, and that fly rod was bent in a U, according to Holder. Now, Holder said, I knew I had to take my time if I hoped to land it. I had all evening, so that's what I did. It's spectacular and awesome. I never thought I would hook into something that big. Holder said he plans to retire his one-weight fly rod that landed his record fish, and he also plans to have the fish mounted. Way to go.
Congratulations on your new record.
For our female listeners tuning in today on WHBY AM 1150 or FM 103.5 out of Appleton in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, I've got an event for you. It's the 2025 Wisconsin Women in the Outdoors. It's a 3-day event being held at the Crescent Lake Bible Camp in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. The dates, August 22nd through August 24th. It's described as an opportunity for women of all ages, backgrounds, and states of life who share at least one thing in common, enjoying the outdoors, to have a fun, relaxed weekend. You'll participate in 4 classes of your choice in a safe environment where you'll feel at ease learning something new with the help of experienced instructors. Now, Women in the Outdoors is an outreach program for the National Wild Turkey Federation, which is one of the largest wildlife and land conservationists in the nation. Women from Wisconsin and adjacent states. So some of our listeners in Minnesota, Illinois, or Michigan might be interested in this too. Things you might do include high ropes course, archery, learning about deer hunting, doing some trap shooting, blacksmithing, sausage making, mushroom cooking, or enjoy making feathered jewelry or a painted sign on brush boards. The weekend includes shopping via fundraising. We're talking about silent auction items, raffle, and a live auction. As for the venue, the Crescent Lake Bible Camp has over 60 acres to explore. It's located in the beautiful North Woods of Wisconsin. You can enjoy the tranquility of the property while walking by the lake, across a field, or along a stream where you might see a fox, a red-tailed hawk, a white-tailed deer, or even an eagle. Your paid registration of $280 for adults or $240 for youth ages 13 from 17 includes lodging, 5 meals, 3 hands-on classes with materials, and a bonus, no errands to run, meals to cook, spaces to desk or vacuum. Don't even have to clean the dishes. You can find out more and register today at the Wisconsin Women in the Outdoors Facebook page. But hurry, there's only limited space. Something this fun is going to probably fill up fast. And on that note, it is time to go. But until next time, I'm hoping you're healthy, you're blessed, and do remember this. It is your country and your outdoors, so get out there and enjoy it.